Hello, my miracles. It is another coffee and crime, but this one is different. Why? There's two reasons why. It is the year 2018, so Happy New Year. I hope 2017 brought you a year of challenge, strength, happiness, all that good stuff. And I'm looking forward to this year to be something that I will always remember. So the second reason why I'm very excited for this episode is, and this is gonna sound very odd and weird to a lot of people, true crime has always been my passion and obsession. I go really in depth in research and just become kind of obsessed with certain crimes. This one is by far my number one favorite, would you say, true crime. This is my favorite killer. I know that's weird coming out of my mouth, but ever since I read the book Thou Shalt Not Kill, this crime has been on the forefront of my mind. Every time I do research on any other crime, I always think of this crime. And this will be a lengthy video because I go into a lot of detail about this killer, and hopefully you have heard of this person and maybe want to do some research on your own, but we're gonna jump right into it. Grab your coffee. I am out of coffee. I know, stop the presses, it's shocking, but grab your coffee. We're gonna talk some crime. So John Emil List was born on September 17th, 1925 in Bay City, Michigan. John was the only child of German-American parents, John Frederick List and Alma Maria Barbara Florence. John followed in his father's choice of religion, which was Lutheran, and also became a Sunday school teacher. In 1943, he enlisted in the U.S. Army and served as a laboratory technician during World War II. In 1946, John was discharged from the Army. He enrolled at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, where he earned a bachelor's degree in business administration and a master's degree in accounting. In November 1950, the Korean War escalated and John was recalled to active military service. He met Helen Morris Taylor, a widow of an infantry officer killed in action. Helen had a daughter named Brenda. John and Helen married on December 1st, 1951 in Baltimore, and the family moved to Northern California, where John served as an Army accountant. After the Army, John worked for an accounting firm in Detroit and then as an audit supervisor at a paper company in Kalamazoo. During that time, John and Helen had 3 children. By 1959, John had risen to become a general supervisor in the accounting department. Helen had become an alcoholic and had become increasingly unstable. Helen's oldest daughter, Brenda, from her previous marriage, left the home in 1960 after getting married. John decided to move the family to Rochester, New York to take a job with Xerox, where he eventually became Director of Accounting Services. In 1965, he accepted another position as a Vice President and Controller at a bank in Jersey City, New Jersey. He again moved the family and his mother into Breeze Knoll, a 19-room Victorian mansion on Hillside Avenue in Westfield, New Jersey. Throughout John List's life, he was a forgettable man. His demeanor was mild and quiet. His neighbors reported that when John would mow his lawn, he wore a tie. He was very religious and strict with his children, not wanting them to become involved in acting, the music of that time, and anything that was considered sinful in his opinion. Throughout his career, John had many jobs. He was continuously fired from each, not because of his work ethic, but because of his personality. The mansion the family was living in was causing a financial strain on John, and Helen was also spending and continuing to drink. In the year 1971, John lost his job, yet did not inform his family. He would get up in the morning, get dressed, and leave home pretending to still be employed. John was humiliated, and while his family thought he was working, he would spend the day at the Westfield train station reading newspapers until it was time for him to go home. To pay for the mortgage on the mansion, John would take money from his mother's bank accounts. On November 9th, 1971, John List woke up in the morning with a single thought on his mind. John got dressed and went down to the kitchen. He sat with all three of his children and ate breakfast with them. After sending the children off to school, John went out to the garage and loaded two guns, a 9mm pistol and a .22 caliber pistol. His wife Helen, who was 46, had come down to the kitchen to have her morning coffee. John said a few words to her, then went into the front room. He came around back so that he was behind her and shot her in the back of the head. He then walked up the stairs to his mother's apartment in the attic, kissed her, then shot her in the head above the left eye. He then went back downstairs and cleaned up the blood so that the rest of the children would not realize what was going on. John then went to the post office to stop the family's mail. While at the post office, he mailed letters to the children's schools, excusing them for a few weeks due to a trip they were taking to help care for an ailing relative. Then John went to the bank where he took out more than $2,000 from his mother's accounts. John returned home, made himself some lunch, sat at the exact same table that he shot his wife at. He was later quoted saying, "I was hungry, that's just the way it was." John waited for his 16-year-old daughter, Patricia, and 13-year-old son, Frederick, to arrive home from school. He shot each of them in the back of the head. He then drove to Westfield High School to watch his 15-year-old son, John Jr., play in a soccer game. He then drove John home, shot him repeatedly in the chest and face. Unlike the other children, John Jr. did not go quietly, his body jerking as John emptied both guns into his own son. John dragged all of the bodies, which he placed in sleeping bags, to the mansion's ballroom. He lined all four of the bodies up, covering each of their faces. His mother was left in her apartment. John said she was too heavy to move downstairs. He then cleaned up the various crime scenes in a meticulous fashion. He cut himself out of all of the family pictures in the home, turned on the radio station to a religious classical station, turned the thermostat to cold, and left. Since the family was considered reclusive and refused to socialize, it wasn't until December 7th, nearly a month later, that the neighbors noticed the mansion's lights turned on both night and day, and no apparent activity within the mansion. Finally, as the lights began to burn out one by one, the neighbors called the police. When police arrived at the mansion, neighbors informed them that the List family had gone on a trip, yet were unsure if John's mother had gone with them. Concerned for her well-being, the police entered the mansion through an unlocked window. The police began searching the home, starting with the kitchen, and saw what appeared to be bloodstains on the floor. The classical music continued to play throughout the home, and one officer said it felt like he was at a funeral parlor. Making their way to the ballroom, the officers pulled back the heavy curtains and shined their flashlights into the darkness. They discovered the bodies of Helen and her three children laid out neatly in a row, their faces covered. Unaccounted for still was John List and his mother. The officers continued to search the home for close to 45 minutes. That's how huge the mansion was, until they reached the 3rd floor where John's mother's apartment was. There lay Alma, John's mother. She was 85 years old. And like all the other family members, her face had been covered. The only member not there was John List. It didn't take them long to discover John's 5-page letter that was located on the 1st floor in his office. The letter was dated November 9th, 1971, the day of the murders. In the letter, John took full responsibility for all of the murders. He wrote that he was facing bankruptcy and he killed his family to spare them from the sinful effects from a life of poverty. He wrote in his letter he was certain all had gone to heaven. He ended the letter with a P.S. Quote, "Mother is in the attic, 3rd floor. She was too heavy to move." The mansion on Breeze Knoll was destroyed by arson on August 20th, 1972, 10 months after the murders. A new home was built in its place. A nationwide manhunt was launched. 2 days after the bodies were discovered, the family car was found parked at JFK Airport in New York City, but there was no evidence that John had boarded a flight. John List had a 2-month head start, so the authorities were scrambling to try to find him. This crime became the most notorious crime in New Jersey history. John settled in Denver, Colorado in early 1972 and took an accountant job under the name Robert Peter Clark. John met Dolores Miller at a religious gathering, marrying her in 1985. The couple then moved to Virginia. John, using the same name Robert Clark, resumed work as an accountant. In 1989, a Denver neighbor watched an America's Most Wanted episode focused on John List. On the episode, a life-size bust of what John List would look like was featured. The neighbor instantly recognized John and called in. John List was arrested on June 1st, 1989 at a Richmond accounting firm. He continued to stand by his alias name for several months, even after his transfer back to New Jersey. Faced with irrefutable evidence, including a fingerprint match and evidence at the crime scene, John finally confessed his true identity on February 16, 1990. On April 12, 1990, John List was convicted of 5 counts of first-degree murder. A court-appointed psychiatrist testified John suffered from obsessive-compulsive personality disorder and that he saw only 2 solutions to his situation: accept welfare or kill his family and send their souls to heaven. At the sentencing hearing, John denied responsibility for his actions. He was quoted as saying, "I feel that because of my mental state at the time, I was unaccountable for what happened. I ask all affected by this for their forgiveness, understanding, and prayer." John was sentenced to 5 terms of life imprisonment. John had been on the run for 18 years, 5 months, and 22 days. John had given an interview for American Justice while he was in prison. He was 77 years old at the time. He was resentful of his family for many different reasons. He felt like a failure and contemplated suicide, yet being religious, he knew he would go to hell. He also contemplated just abandoning his family and leaving them for welfare to take care of them. Yet his pride ruled this out, and in his understanding of his religion, poverty was a sin. John reached the conclusion that he would kill his family. He thought about this act for nearly a month before he committed the murders. John believed that out of all the options, this option was the best. He stated that he knew eventually God would forgive him of his crimes. Another interview done with Connie Chung in 2002, John was asked why he didn't take his own life after killing his family. He said that suicide would have barred him from heaven, where he hoped to be reunited with his family. John did later express regret for his crime, saying, "I wish I had never done what I did. I've regretted my action and prayed for forgiveness ever since." On March 21st, 2008, at the age of 82, John List died of complications of pneumonia. This crime has been my obsession. I know John List is dead and gone, but I continue to just be obsessed with this crime. So I hope you guys enjoyed this very special Coffee and Crime. Like I said in the beginning, this is my favorite true crime of all time. And I just really hope that you enjoyed it like I did. Comment down below if you've ever heard of John List, and if you know of any facts that I missed, comment down below. Other than that, Happy New Year once again, and I love you guys so much. Click that like button. If you are not a miracle and want to be, click that subscribe button. Watch a miracle happen. Click the notification bell also to be notified on every video that I upload, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.